As a certified financial planner, there is one question that I get more than anything else from my client. Retirement is tricky. And the reason is retirement is a very, very long time. For most people, they're retiring in their mid 60s or early 70s. They have 20 to 30 years of retirement. Guess what? A lot happens in a 30-year time window. You have things like deaths in the family. You have health complications. You have decreased and increased spending patterns depending on the years of your life and what you're going through. Retirement, realistically, is not linear. You don't just spend the same amount every single year. And so when you ask yourself the question, how much money do I need to retire? There's really actually no golden number, and that can be a little bit scary. The truth is, the more money you have, the more flexibility and resilience you have in your retirement plan. But there are a few rules that myself as a certified financial planner uses in order to help give clients more confidence as they enter into retirement, and hopefully to tell their boss that they quit and you're never going to see them again. So the first and probably most common rule that you may have heard of before is the 4% rule. This rule was popularized by William Bengen in the 90s. And what he surmised is that if you keep your withdrawals to 4% of your total portfolio value every single year in retirement, you're never going to run out of money. The thought is that as long as you're invested in, I believe, a traditional 60-40 portfolio, meaning 60% equities, 40% bonds, so you're well diversified, then if you pull out 4% of your investments every single year for the rest of your life, you should not run out of money. Now, this, if you go back historically, has actually worked. The stock market, since he's made that prediction, has done extremely well. Realistically, that number in most cases is actually higher than 4%. If you talk to anybody who has either retired since then or is planning on retiring now, odds are pretty high that you're going to hear the 4% rule come up. And that's because it is typically known as the relatively safe rate of withdrawal. And that's what clients typically use in order to say, okay, if I have $1 million in my portfolio, then I can pull out $40,000 per year and make sure that I never run out of money. It's very simple. It's very easy. It's a nice general rule of thumb to figure out how much do I need in order to retire. When you know that you're going to spend 4% of your portfolio every single year, you can very easily back into how much you would need to have saved in order to live the lifestyle that you want to live in retirement. And a key thing to keep in mind is that, at least in today's day and age, oftentimes when somebody retires, they're not just living off of that $40,000 a year that they're pulling out. They will have Social Security coming in, or if they're doing really well, they may also have a pension or some sort of military pension as well. And so those types of fixed incomes stack up on each other, and that 4% really just needs to cover your surplus on top of your fixed income that's coming in retirement years from Social Security or from a pension. Another key point on the 4% rule is that not only is it 4% of your total portfolio value that you can withdraw, it also accounts for inflation. And so what you do is you take your $40,000 and then you increase that every single year by inflation, because in 30 years, $40,000 is not going to go nearly as far as it would today. And so it's 4% of your portfolio plus whatever inflation is every single year as an increase. So that sounds great. That sounds very easy. If I need $40,000 on top of what I'm going to get from Social Security, then I should have about $1 million invested in the market to cover my 30-year retirement window. But there are a number of things that can really throw that off. There's a couple of things that 4% rule doesn't take into account. So in reality, the 4% rule is a really great place to start, but it doesn't take into account the fact that life throws you curveballs. So as you can see, the 4% rule is a really great starting point. It's a really nice rule of thumb to say, I know I'm going to need $40,000 out of my portfolio every single year, so I should have about $1 million invested. But it doesn't take into account a couple of things. The very first thing that comes to mind is that life is not linear. As I mentioned, your expenses and lifestyle doesn't just go like this. In the financial planning world, we like to say the no-go, the slow-go, and the go-go years. And what that means is when you first retire, oftentimes you're still in great health. You are young, you're vibrant, you just stopped working and you've been saving up all this money and you want to enjoy it, right? You've been working your entire life. And so you may be taking additional trips. You might be visiting family quite a bit more because your kids are probably having young kids and now's the time to spend time with them. And so those early years, those golden years of retirement, usually your expenses are made up of a lot of additional discretionary expenses through travel and fun things and just enjoying being retired and not having to go to work. Those are going to be the go-go years. Then what happens is you get older. Typically, you've got some additional health events, and so you start to slow down a little bit. And maybe your kids and your grandkids start to grow up and you don't see them as much. And so you don't have to travel and do all these crazy things. You're slowing down a little bit. You're falling back into a standardized pace of life. And those are going to be your slow go years. And that's because when we look at the data, retirement spending isn't necessarily a diagonal line. It's actually more like a U. And what I mean by that is you have your high expense years when you first start out because you're traveling and doing all the fun things during your go-go years, and then they slow down and you kind of hit a lull where you're not traveling as much, but you don't also have medical expenses that have kicked in. And so your expenses are actually really reasonable in those middle years. But then as you get older and older and you enter into those no-go years, typically your expenses do rise because of healthcare costs. So keeping in mind that life is dynamic and spending habits fluctuate throughout different stages of retirement, the answer isn't usually a clean 4%. Realistically, when I'm talking to clients and trying to help them maximize their retirement and maximize their enjoyment of the money that they saved their entire life, I say, let's actually spend a little bit more on the front end and enjoy the healthy years. Let's travel, let's spend time with family, let's do the things that we love and pursue the hobbies because we can and because we still have our health, which is realistically one of the most important things for us. And so I actually like to see clients spend a little bit more on the front end, which yes, maybe doesn't make as much financial sense, but it makes the most sense when it comes to maximizing their return on life. Then I like to say, let's spend a little bit less during those slow go years in preparation for the fact that we may need to use some of that for later healthcare costs. That's the beauty of having an ongoing relationship with a financial planner is they know your life, they know your lifestyle, and they can help you as you figure out how much do we earmark for a travel out west this year versus saving and investing for healthcare expenses in the future. That's the constant battle that we fight in saying, okay, do we want to enjoy the money now and have the experiences, or do we want to save for something in the future that may come down the line? But tomorrow is also not guaranteed. It's pretty clear that there's not just one hard line in the sand for how much you need in order to retire. It depends on a number of different factors. If I believe that I need to be able to pull $40,000 a year out of my portfolio, then yes, by the 4% rule, I need to have $1 million invested and saved up for retirement. But every extra dollar above and beyond that can go towards enjoying those earlier years of retirement or helping out family or leaving a legacy. And there are things that we can control, and it makes sense to invest for the future, but it also makes sense to enjoy what we have today and make the most of our time, because the value of a dollar today and an experience today can pay dividends over a lifetime of memories. The hard truth is that there are things in life that we can't control. We can all have a medical issue that comes up and requires a substantial amount of out-of-pocket costs for the rest of our life, and there's nothing that we can do to control that. If we were to retire tomorrow, then those assets may not last as long as you had hoped, or you may not have as much flexibility as you hoped. There is a real cost to retiring in a really bad year of the stock market versus a really good year. You can run into many issues like having an unforeseen health event that costs you a lot of money out of pocket for healthcare every single year, and that could eat up your assets. You could end up retiring when in 2008 when the stock market started to fall out, and now instead of $1 million, you have 700,000, and that 4% makes up a lot less of your needs. There's a lot of different factors at play, and that's why working with a financial planner to actually look at that risk and say, is this something that I'm comfortable with bearing, is a very important thing. When we talk to our clients, we are covering all of these different conversations to say, what gives us the most amount of confidence going into retirement, and how do we maximize the utility of the money that we've spent our entire lives accumulating? How do we make the most of that? And that's why we like to say, let's not just look at maximizing your investments, let's maximize your return on life. And that could be spending more in those early years of retirement, or when the market's doing well, spending less when the market's doing poorly, or when things start to slow down a little bit, but we still need to put some money away for potentially added healthcare costs in the future. So the beauty of life is that it's dynamic, and there's not just one rule to rule them all. But 4% rule is not a bad place to start. I would highly recommend, if you're nearing retirement, reach out to a retirement planner, ideally a certified financial planner, a CFP, and they can help you plan for retirement and run through all the risks and all the considerations when it comes to saying, at what point can I call it quits and make the most of my money? So if you like these videos and you enjoy learning more about retirement, then please hit that subscribe button, leave us a like, and let us know in the comment section if you have any questions around retirement that you'd like for us to make a video on. We're happy to do so. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video. See you then.